It was a silent night in orbit, far above the blue Earth. The space station floated quietly, wrapped in darkness. Only the faint glow of Earth's clouds and city lights gave a reminder that life was still below. Inside, Commander Elias sat near the radio console. He had listened to space signals for years, static, noise, the usual chatter from satellites. But this night was different. Something unusual cracked through the silence, a faint pulse, a rhythm, not random, not natural. He leaned closer, turning the dials with careful fingers. His eyes narrowed. This is not human, he whispered to himself. The console gave another faint beat, like a whisper from far away. The sound was soft, trembling, almost afraid. Elias pressed record. His heart pounded. He had always dreamed of finding proof of life beyond Earth, but this didn't feel like discovery. It felt like warning, and then the line came back to him, a memory he would never forget. I still remember that night, he thought. The night he first heard the whisper that changed everything. The sound wasn't words, not at first. It was patterns, numbers, repeated again and again. But hidden inside those numbers was meaning. His mind struggled to break it apart. He tapped the console, wrote down the sequences, and suddenly something clicked. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't peace. It was fear. Elias froze in his chair. His breath caught in his chest. The message, once decoded, was simple. Beware. They are watching you. He looked around the dark room. The air felt heavy. The station walls groaned softly with the pull of orbit. Somewhere outside, Earth turned silently. But Elias felt no comfort. He felt eyes on him, though he knew no one was there. The whisper came again, stronger this time, as if the sender was desperate. And then another layer of sound broke through the signal. Voices. Faint, alien, trembling voices. They were not warning each other. They were warning themselves. Humanity must not be allowed to grow. Too dangerous. Too strong. Do not wake them. Elias's hands shook. He turned the radio off, then on again, but the voices stayed. Like echoes from across the galaxy, bouncing through time and space. They carried one message. The universe feared humanity. He stood up, pacing the narrow cabin. The hum of machines filled the silence, steady but cold. A red warning light blinked slowly on the console, like a heartbeat. Elias wiped the sweat from his forehead, though the station was freezing. What are you? He whispered to the empty room. And why do you fear us? The whisper gave no answer. Only silence returned, deep and endless. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Elias thought he saw movement outside the station window. A shadow against the stars. It lingered, then vanished. He pressed his forehead to the glass, eyes searching. The stars burned quietly, distant and calm. Nothing moved, but Elias knew what he saw. Something was out there. Something listening. Something waiting. Hours passed, but he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the voices returned. They spoke of wars not yet fought, of power not yet discovered. They spoke of fire, survival, and human rage. The aliens were not warning Earth for kindness. They were warning each other. Do not provoke them. Do not touch their world. If they rise, none of us will survive. Elias pressed his palms against his ears. The voices echoed inside his skull now, as if burned into him. He thought of Earth below. Millions of people living their normal lives, unaware that across the stars, civilizations trembled at their name. He thought of firestorms, of soldiers who never gave up, of history filled with wars and survival against impossible odds. Maybe the aliens were right. Humanity had always been dangerous, not because of weapons, but because of will. Because when humans are pushed, they do not fall. They fight. When the dawn came and Earth's sunlight spilled across the station walls, Elias felt no warmth. He only felt the whisper still burning in his chest. He downloaded the recording to a secure drive. His superiors needed to hear this. The world needed to know. But as he sealed the drive and placed it in a locked case, another thought struck him cold. What if the world wasn't ready? What if knowing the truth only made things worse? The whisper echoed again, faint and trembling, almost like a warning inside his mind. They fear you. Because one day you will rise. Elias closed his eyes. His hands tightened into fists. He did not know what the future held. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer alone, and somewhere in the vast, silent universe, something far older, far greater, was already afraid. The next morning, Elias sat inside the shuttle as it descended through the clouds. The earth below was calm, but his mind was not. The drive in his pocket felt heavier than metal. It felt like a secret too big to carry. When he landed, men in dark suits were already waiting. No greetings, no small talk, just a quiet nod, and they guided him into a black car. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Elias wanted to ask questions, but something in their cold silence told him not to. The car drove deeper, through guarded gates and down a tunnel that disappeared beneath the ground. At the end of the tunnel was a steel door. It opened slowly with a sound that echoed like thunder. Behind it was a place he had never seen before, an underground archive. Rows upon rows of locked cabinets, screens flickering with unreadable codes, and dim lights that hummed with power. "This way," one of the men said. His voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. They led Elias into a chamber where another figure was waiting. An older man with gray hair wearing a military uniform with no name tag. His eyes were cold but curious. "You heard the signal," the man said, not asking, but stating. Elias nodded. He placed the drive on the table. The older man slid it into a console. The faint alien whispers filled the room. Even here, in this deep chamber, the voices sounded like ghosts. The older man listened carefully. He did not flinch. He only sighed, as if he already knew. "Yes," he said quietly. "They still fear us." Elias blinked. "Still? You mean, this isn't the first time?" The man's lips tightened. He pressed a button, and one of the walls lit up with a projection. Old documents, photographs, grainy recordings flickered across the screen. Soldiers standing in deserts, pilots chasing strange lights, ships vanishing into storms. "This archive," the man said, "has existed for decades. Every strange event, every unexplained shadow in the sky, every signal from the stars, it is all collected here." Elias felt his stomach twist. He looked at the photographs. Some were marked classified. "Top secret. Do not disclose," the man continued. "Aliens have been watching us for centuries. They study us. They never interfere, not directly. Do you know why?" Elias shook his head. The older man leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because they are afraid. Afraid of us." The word struck Elias like ice. He remembered the whispers from the radio, the trembling voices, but hearing it confirmed like this made his chest tighten. "Afraid of what?" Elias asked. "Our weapons? Our armies?" The man shook his head slowly. "No, weapons can be destroyed. Armies can be defeated. They fear something else, something they cannot erase. They fear our spirit, our refusal to surrender. Every time humanity is pushed to the edge, we rise. That is what terrifies them." Elias tried to breathe, but the air in the chamber felt heavy. He looked again at the files. Wars, disasters, tragedies. Each time humans had suffered, and each time humans had survived. The older man pressed another button. A new file appeared, one Elias had never seen before. It showed a blurred photo of a strange creature, tall, thin, with eyes like black mirrors. "This," the man said, "was from the first contact. Long ago, before the records were sealed. They did not come in peace. They came to control us, to shape us. But they failed." The photo flickered, replaced by reports of sudden disappearances, abandoned ships, broken machinery. "They failed," the man repeated, "because humanity does not break." Elias's hands trembled. He realized the whispers had been true. The aliens did not warn humans out of kindness. They were warning each other. Stay away. Do not awaken the storm that sleeps inside them. Suddenly, the room went silent. The recording stopped. The older man closed the file and leaned back in his chair. His expression was unreadable. "You were never supposed to hear that signal," he said. "But now you have. And once you know the truth, you can't go back." Elias swallowed hard. His throat was dry. "What happens now?" The older man stood. His shadow stretched long across the room under the dim light. Now you understand why the archives must remain hidden. Humanity must not know, not yet. If the people of Earth knew the universe feared them, do you think they would stay calm? Or would they become exactly what the aliens already believe? Elias had no answer. He only stared at the cold steel walls, at the secrets buried in this underground tomb. The older man turned away, his voice low and final. The universe fears humanity, but the day may come when humanity learns to fear itself. The words echoed in Elias's mind as the steel door closed behind him. He felt trapped, not by the walls, but by the knowledge he now carried. Above them, the world went on as normal. But deep in the dark, humanity's greatest secret remained locked away, and Elias knew. It would not stay hidden forever. The desert was burning under the sun, the air trembling with heat. The year was 2027, and far away from the cities, a war was raging. Soldiers moved like shadows across the sand, their boots sinking into the dust, their rifles heavy in their hands. Private Daniel Cole was one of them. He had been sent here like the others, fighting a battle that never seemed to end. The sound of gunfire echoed across the dunes. Explosions painted the horizon with fire. The smell of smoke clung to the air, sharp and choking. Daniel's heart raced as he crouched behind a broken wall. His uniform was torn, his face covered with sweat and dirt. Around him, the cries of his comrades filled the air, shouts, commands, screams. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, Daniel felt something strange, a silence, a presence. He lifted his head just enough to look at the sky. At first, he thought it was just smoke, a shadow stretching across the blue. But then the shape sharpened, long, silent, smooth like glass. It hovered above the battlefield. Not a plane, not a drone, something else, something alien. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. The object didn't attack. It didn't fire. It only lingered above them, as if watching, studying. Around him, the other soldiers were too busy fighting to notice, but Daniel could not look away. For a long moment, the war below felt small compared to the giant shadow above. Gunfire cracked, but the object stayed still. Bullets tore through the sand, but it remained untouched. Daniel whispered under his breath, "What are you?" As if in answer, the shadow pulsed. A faint light glimmered from its surface, like the reflection of a dying sun. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought it might descend, but it didn't. It trembled, then pulled away, retreating higher into the sky. He watched as it vanished into the clouds, leaving only silence behind. His chest tightened. He knew what he had seen. But when he turned to his comrades, none of them had noticed. The battle raged on. The world screamed in fire. But Daniel's eyes kept searching the sky. That night, after the fighting slowed, Daniel sat alone by the dying flames of a campfire. The desert was cold now, the stars bright and endless above. He couldn't stop thinking about the shadow. He remembered the way it had hovered, the way it had trembled. Not like a hunter, not like a predator, but like something afraid. It was impossible. Humanity had always feared the unknown. Ghosts, shadows, the dark. But what he saw today told him the truth was different. The unknown feared us. He closed his eyes, hearing again the screams of the battlefield, the chaos, the pain. Humanity was fragile, yes, flesh and bone. But fragile things could also be dangerous. Fragile things could also fight. Daniel thought of history, how humans had always risen from ashes, from wars, from disasters. He thought of how soldiers kept fighting even when the battle seemed lost. He thought of survival, and suddenly, he understood. The ship wasn't watching out of curiosity. It wasn't gathering information. It was keeping its distance. It was afraid to get too close. The next morning, Daniel told his commander what he had seen. The older man stared at him, silent. Then, without a word, the commander handed him a sealed envelope. "Deliver this to headquarters," he said. Daniel hesitated. "Sir, Don't speak of what you saw," the commander cut him off. His eyes were hard, his voice low. "Not to anyone. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded slowly, though his chest burned with questions. He took the envelope and left. On the way back, the silence of the desert felt heavier than the war itself. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. Every shadow on the sand felt like another presence watching. He knew now. He was not the only witness. The commanders knew. The governments knew. Maybe the archives Elias had seen were not secrets kept only in underground rooms. Maybe they stretched everywhere, across every battlefield, across every sky, and maybe the universe itself was the silent witness, watching, waiting, afraid. That night, back at base, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the sky through the narrow window. The stars shimmered like cold eyes. He thought of the shadow above the battlefield. He thought of the tremble in its light. His hands shook as he whispered to himself, "They're not hunters. They're not gods. They're afraid of us." The words chilled him, because if they were afraid, then humanity was more dangerous than anyone had ever realized. And if the universe feared humanity, then maybe humanity should fear itself too. The room smelled of dust and old paper. Deep inside the underground, archives. Elias was guided into another chamber, one even more hidden than the rest. The steel door creaked open, revealing shelves stacked with boxes that looked untouched for decades. The flickering light overhead cast long shadows across the room, making it feel more like a tomb than a library. The older man in uniform, the one Elias had met before, walked slowly to the center of the room. He placed his hand on one of the boxes and said in a low voice, "This is the part of history no one is meant to see, the part that explains why the universe fears us." Elias stepped closer, his heartbeat quickening. "What is it?" he asked. The man pulled open the box. Inside were yellowed documents, faded photographs, and reels of old film. The first photograph showed something Elias did not expect: a group of scientists standing beside a strange, tall figure. The creature had long arms, black eyes, and skin that looked almost translucent. Elias swallowed. "Is that—" The man nodded. "Yes. An alien. One of the first captured, decades ago, before all the records were buried." Elias's hands trembled as he picked up another photo. This one showed a strange machine, wires connected to the alien's head. Scientists stood around, observing. "They tried to control us," the man continued. His voice was cold, steady. "They thought they could shape human minds, turn us into something weaker, something obedient, but they failed." He opened another file. This one contained reports, experiments done not on the alien, but on humans. Elias's eyes widened. What is this?" The man's face darkened. "They wanted to see how much pain a human could take, how much suffering before the mind breaks. But every test ended the same way. The humans survived. They adapted. They endured. The aliens watched in silence as their experiment turned against them." Elias felt sick. His stomach churned as he read lines of the reports. Men exposed to fire, cold, starvation. Women placed under extreme stress, yet refusing to give in. Children surviving when they should not have. "It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake," the man said. "It was fear. They wanted to know our limits. But instead of limits, they found something else, something no other species had." Elias's voice shook. "What did they find?" The man leaned close, his shadow falling across Elias's face. "They found that humans do not stop. When broken, they rebuild. When crushed, they rise. When defeated, they fight again. That is what they learned. And that is why they are afraid. Elias set the file down, his chest heavy. The whispers from the signal came back to him, echoing in his mind. Do not wake them. Do not provoke them. Now he understood. The aliens had once tried to turn humanity into slaves, but instead they discovered something far more terrifying: resilience. The older man turned on a projector. The film flickered to life on the wall, showing shaky black and white footage. In the grainy image, Elias saw soldiers marching through snow, their faces pale with frost, yet their bodies moving forward. He saw people in burning cities pulling each other from the rubble. He saw humanity surviving against every disaster thrown at them. These are not just wars, the man said. These are experiments, some pushed by aliens, some by our own world, and through every one of them, we endured. The film shifted. The next image froze Elias in place. It showed the alien again, but this time, not standing tall. It was crouched low, its head bent. Its black eyes reflected fear. Elias whispered, "It was afraid." "Yes," the man said, "because it realized the truth. Humanity is not strong because of power or weapons. Humanity is strong because it refuses to surrender. That is something the universe cannot fight." The projector clicked off. The room fell silent again, heavy with the weight of the forgotten past. Elias rubbed his temples. Why hide this? Why not tell the world? The older man's eyes grew hard. Because if the world knew Elias, it would change everything. People would no longer fear the universe. They would believe the universe fears them. And what kind of humanity would that create? Elias had no answer. The question hung in the air like a shadow. As he left the chamber, the whispers from the alien signal haunted him more than ever. They were not just voices from across the stars. They were memories of a past humanity was never meant to know. He thought of the photographs, of the trembling alien, of the experiments, and deep down, he realized something chilling. If the universe had once feared humanity, then it still did. And if humanity ever discovered the full truth, what would they become? Elias shivered as the steel door closed behind him. The forgotten experiment was not truly forgotten. It was alive, buried in the shadows, waiting for the day it would be remembered. Far beyond Earth, in the blackness of space, another world trembled. It was not the first. It would not be the last. Across the galaxy, in places Elias would never see, entire civilizations whispered the same name: humanity. On a distant planet, a council of alien leaders sat inside a vast chamber carved from crystal. The air was heavy with tension. Their eyes, glowing in shades of blue and green, darted nervously from one to another. One of them finally spoke, his voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. "They are growing stronger. Too fast, too dangerous. If we do nothing, they will rise beyond control." A second leader slammed a clawed hand on the table. "We should strike now. Destroy their planet before they spread further into the stars." A silence followed. Not because they disagreed, but because they were afraid. They had seen it before. One species after another had tried to conquer humanity, to bend them, to break them, and each time the result was the same. Humanity survived. Humanity adapted. Humanity grew stronger. The whispers spread through the chamber like fire. They rise from every disaster. They fight even when they should not. They turn weakness into strength. The council fell quiet again, their words lost in the shadows. Finally, the oldest among them spoke. His voice was low, ancient, filled with sorrow. "You do not understand. To destroy them is to risk becoming them. If we strike, we awaken the very spirit we fear. Humanity is not feared for what they are now, but for what they will become." Back on Earth, Elias sat in his small apartment, staring out at the night sky. Weeks had passed since he left the archives, but the voices still haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard them. Do not provoke them. Do not wake them. But what troubled him most was not the aliens' fear. It was the silence of his own world. Governments remained quiet. The truth stayed hidden. People went on with their lives, never knowing that somewhere across the stars, alien councils argued about whether or not humanity should be destroyed. Elias thought of Daniel Cole, the soldier who had seen the shadow above the battlefield. He thought of the trembling alien in the old photographs. He thought of all the buried experiments, and he realized something terrifying. The fear was spreading, not just among aliens, but among humans too, those few who knew the secret. In a hidden room of the Pentagon, generals argued, we need to prepare. If they fear us, it means they will act sooner or later. Another general shook his head. If we prepare, we confirm their fear. We cannot show them our hand. Not yet? But what if they come? They won't, a voice replied from the dark corner of the room. Because they are too afraid. The generals fell silent. Even among the strongest of Earth's leaders, the truth was clear. Humanity had become both a weapon and a warning. Far across the galaxy, another council gathered. This one smaller, more desperate. The youngest of them spoke first. They call us cowards for waiting. But I have seen it with my own eyes. I saw humans fight until their bodies burned. I saw them rise from ruins as if fire gave them strength. We cannot fight such creatures, his voice cracked. His eyes darted to the others. We can only hide. The chamber filled with murmurs. Some wanted war. Some wanted silence. But all of them agreed on one thing. Humanity was not like the others. And so, the fear spread, from one council to another, from one whisper to the next. Entire galaxies carried the story like a shadow, a story of a fragile species of flesh and bone that would not die. Elias sat by his window as the rain tapped against the glass. The city below glowed with lights, unaware of the secret above them. He wondered how long the silence would last. Would humanity remain blind forever? Or would the truth one day rise like the dawn, impossible to hide? He imagined the moment. Humanity learning that the universe feared them. Some would be proud. Some would be terrified. And some would want to prove the fear correct. The thought made his chest tighten. Because if humanity embraced that truth, if they began to see themselves as monsters, what then? He whispered to himself, almost afraid to hear his own voice. The universe fears us. But maybe one day, we will fear ourselves too. Above him, beyond the clouds, beyond the stars, the whispers continued. Do not provoke them. Do not touch their world. If they rise, none of us will survive. And with each whisper, the fear spread further, until the entire galaxy seemed to tremble with one unspoken truth. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm waiting to come. The message came without warning. It was late evening when Elias returned to his small apartment. The city outside was quiet, rain falling softly against the streets. He placed his coat on the chair, turned on the lamp, and sat down by the desk. For once he wanted silence. No archives, no whispers, just silence. But silence was not what he received. The screen on his desk flickered suddenly, though he had not touched it. The light glowed pale blue, filling the dark room. Elias leaned forward, confused. What now? He whispered. The static shifted, forming shapes. At first only a blur, then a figure, then many. Shadows of faces he had never seen before, faces that were not human. Their eyes glowed like stars. Their skin shimmered as though woven from glass. Their voices came together as one, low and trembling. Human of Earth, they said. Do not be afraid. Elias's breath caught. His heart thundered. For weeks he had heard whispers, faint voices carried by signals. But now, for the first time, they were speaking directly to him. He could not move. He could only listen. The voices continued. You have wondered why we watch you, why we linger in the shadows, why we whisper in fear. The truth must now be spoken. Elias's hand trembled against the desk. The light from the screen flickered across his face, pale and ghostly. He forced his voice out, though it cracked with fear. Why? Why are you afraid of us? The shadows on the screen shifted. One figure leaned closer, its voice softer than the rest. We do not fear your weapons. We do not fear your armies. We fear something deeper. Elias swallowed hard. The room felt smaller, colder. The voice grew heavier. We fear your will. We fear your refusal to fall. We fear the storm that rises inside you when all else is lost. Elias shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. We're fragile. We bleed. We die. How can that frighten you? The figure's eyes glimmered. Because you always return. You survive fire. You survive ice. You survive war and ruin. We watched as your kind rebuilt after every destruction. We watched as you fought even when you had no hope. No other species carries this curse, or this gift. Elias felt his chest tighten. He thought of history, wars, disasters, plagues. Humanity always endured, always rebuilt. And now, across the galaxy, civilizations trembled because of it. The voices continued, trembling with something he had never expected. Fear mixed with respect. We tried to shape you once. We tried to break you, but each attempt only made you stronger. That is why we whisper. That is why we warn. Humanity is not a child of peace. Humanity is the fire that refuses to die. Elias leaned back in his chair, his eyes wide. The lamp beside him buzzed softly, the rain outside tapping harder against the window. The truth was heavy. Too heavy, he whispered, almost to himself. Then why not destroy us? If you fear us so much, why not end us before it's too late? The screen went silent. For a long moment, only static filled the room. Elias's heart pounded in his ears. Then the voices returned, softer, almost sorrowful. Because to destroy you would be to destroy ourselves. You are not feared for what you are now, but for what you will become. And if we strike you, if we awaken that future too soon, none of us will survive. Elias froze. His skin went cold. The weight of the words pressed against his chest like stone. Humanity was a storm waiting to rise, and even its enemies knew they could not survive its awakening. The figures began to fade, their glowing eyes dimming. But before the signal ended, one final voice whispered, almost like a secret meant only for him. Remember this. We do not watch you because we wish to harm you. We watch you because we fear the day you learn what you truly are. The screen went black. Elias sat in silence, his breath heavy, his hands trembling. The rain outside had turned into a storm, thunder rumbling in the distance. The room felt darker than before. He whispered to himself, his voice breaking, They fear us. But one day, maybe we will fear ourselves. That night, Elias could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing faces, heard their trembling voices. He realized the truth was not a warning. It was a prophecy. The day of truth had come. Humanity was no longer a secret. The universe did not just fear what humans were. It feared what humans would become. The storm outside had passed, but Elias felt no peace. He sat at his desk, staring at the black screen that only hours before had shown him the faces of another world. The rain had stopped, yet the echo of their words still pounded in his chest. We do not fear your weapons. We fear your will. He repeated the line in his mind again and again until it felt carved into his very soul. Humanity, the fragile species of bone and blood, always struggling, always bleeding, was the very thing that made the galaxy tremble. He rose from the chair and walked to the window. The city below was alive with lights, cars, and people moving about their ordinary lives. They laughed, they argued, they dreamed, never knowing that across the stars, entire civilizations whispered their name with fear. Elias pressed his forehead against the glass. The reflection of his tired face stared back. How would the world react if they knew? He wondered. Some would be proud, claiming humans were destined to rule. Others would be terrified, afraid of what such knowledge might awaken. And Elias himself? He felt both. Pride and fear tangled in his chest like fire and ice. Far away, in places Elias would never see, the fear grew deeper. Across the galaxy, stories of humanity spread like shadows. Some called humans demons of survival. Others called them the children of fire. Entire councils argued whether to hide, to attack, or to wait. But none dared to touch Earth. Not anymore. They all remembered the experiments, the failures, the times they tried to break humanity and only made it stronger. They remembered wars that should have ended in extinction. Yet humanity rose from the ashes each time, and so the whispers carried from one star system to another. Do not provoke them. Do not test them. If they rise, none of us will survive. Back in his apartment, Elias sat again at his desk, his hands pressed together tightly. He had seen the archives. He had read the reports. He had listened to the trembling voices of the alien council, and now he understood the truth. The universe does not fear what humanity is. The universe fears what humanity will become. A species that turns every weakness into strength. A people who rise higher each time they are broken. Fragile, yet unyielding. Mortal, yet unstoppable. That was the secret hidden in the archives. That was the reason the shadows lingered above the battlefields, watching from a distance. That was why alien voices trembled in the dark, because humanity, once awakened, would never stop. The lamp on the desk flickered, pulling Elias from his thoughts. The light dimmed, then steadied again. For a moment, the room felt alive with silence. He almost expected another voice to whisper through the static, but no message came. Only the memory of the last one. We watch you because we fear the day you learn what you truly are. Elias shivered. He had learned. And now the question haunted him. What would happen if the rest of the world did too? Would they rise with wisdom, becoming something greater than fear itself? Or would they embrace the shadow, proving the aliens right, becoming the storm that no one could stop? He did not know. Perhaps no one did. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer just a name on a small blue planet. Humanity was a story whispered across the galaxy, a force that turned even the oldest civilizations into trembling witnesses. And that story was only beginning. Elias stood, looking once more at the stars. They burned quietly above, ancient and endless. Somewhere out there, eyes were still watching, waiting, hoping the storm would not come too soon. He whispered softly, almost to the night itself, "You fear us? Because you know one day we will rise." The words lingered in the air like a promise, a warning, a truth that could never again be buried. And so the story ends where it began, with a whisper. A whisper not of fear alone, but of destiny. The universe fears humanity, because humanity is the only species that refuses extinction. The only species that turns suffering into strength. The only species that cannot be broken. That is why the shadows linger. That is why the whispers tremble. That is why the universe fears humanity.